Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Confidants, I just want to tell you about a book that I've written called Fool Me Twice. It's my memoir and it's a story of how I was scammed and assaulted while online dating. It was a difficult book to write because I really had to overcome the shame of my choices. But I wanted to do it so that I could help other people not get caught in the same trap that I was. At the end of the book, there are a whole lot of suggestions of what people need to look out for and how they can date safely online. My book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online, and it's also in Hong Kong bookstores. Here is a promo for my book. I hope you enjoy it.
From life on a farm in rural Australia, where wide-open spaces made a young woman yearn to know what was beyond her country town. She moved to the city, became a mother, and found her dream career which took her across the world. But still, something was missing. In her search for love, she traveled far, trusted deeply. She wanted so badly to find someone that she almost lost herself in the process and learned some hard lessons along the way. Fool Me Twice, a new memoir by Jules Hannaford. Available on Amazon.
A warning to our listeners, some of the topics discussed in this podcast may be disturbing. If you need support, please contact your local crisis line or helpline. And if you're in Hong Kong and you'd like to call the Samaritans hotline, you can call them on 2896 0000. Today I'm here with Tracey Osborne. Hi Tracey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
This is super exciting because this is my first remote recording. Normally I only ever interview people in Hong Kong, people that either live here or that have been visiting. And this is the first time that I'm recording somebody outside of Hong Kong because your story is so compelling. I really wanted to share it with my listeners. So thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate you making the exception for me. I'm very, very honored.
So exciting. Tracey, tell me how you came up with the idea for the Daring Women company.
I'm the kind of person where I've always wanted to help people. My favorite question is always, how can I help you? How can I support you? And that led me for the past 10 years helping people as a virtual assistant. So I was helping them on the back end build their business and run their business. And that was great. For a while, it was exactly what I needed. I learned so much about running a business and all the marketing and technical stuff. And that decade really led me to being able to fulfill my heart passion, which is helping women. When we have the lottery over here, and people always like to say, what would you do if you won the lottery? For me, my answer to that question was always twofold. One, it was to start an animal rescue. And two, it was to create some kind of a halfway house to help homeless people transition back into society. So that wanting to help people has really kind of fueled the drive behind Daring Woman. And after about 10 years doing the virtual assistant work, it was no longer fulfilling. It was great. It brought in great money, but something was missing. And for years, I'd been having the nagging, you're not following your passion. You're not following your passion. Well, my passion wasn't going to pay the bills right away. In 2017, I finally started listening to that nagging voice. I said, okay, I'm not happy with what I'm doing anymore. I absolutely hate getting up in the morning and going to the computer to do what I need to be doing. And that's not good. It shows up in your work, and that's not how I roll. I decided it was time to listen to that voice. And I started out trying to create a company to empower women entrepreneurs. And I called it Empowered Fempreneurs. And that just wasn't it. The company didn't take off, and it's because it wasn't the right company. It wasn't the right direction. Sat in silence one day and I'm like, okay, I've got to either figure this thing out or forget it. And so sitting in silence, the words daring woman came into my head. And I went, boom, there you go. That's it. It needs to be some kind of a woman empowerment company, not just for business and entrepreneurs, but for women, period.
Yeah, it's such a cool name. I really, really like it. And what was your main mission for creating the Daring Woman movement?
The mission is to create a platform, a place where women can come and share their voice, let their voice be heard, and know that their words are reaching those that need to hear it. And it's a place for women to come and get the support and empowerment and knowledge for them to be able to speak out. And I talk to a lot of trauma survivors, and a lot of our articles and stuff are based around trauma because that's something that's very much in tune with me. And so that's kind of the whole premise behind it. It's really a media company, but I call it a social impact organization that just harnesses the power of media to allow women to find their voice and become unstoppable.
That's so cool. Do they do that by writing articles or doing blogs or doing podcasts or doing social media articles? Is it all of that and more?
All of that.
Speaking?
Yeah, all of that. I do have the Daring Woman podcast, and that's where women come on. And I just have them share their story. So they talk about whatever their backstory is, the traumas and whatnot that they face and how they made it through and how they are thriving today inside of it or even because of it. So that's what the podcast is all about. The website is all about share your articles, share your stories. It's not just a blog for me to be writing on. It's actually think like Huffington Post or Thrive Global, Medium, those kind of websites only for women empowerment. It's really a platform for anyone to share their voice.
Sounds so cool. And it's really important, I think, for people to be able to share their voices because it can be so healing. Do you think that there are any other reasons why it's important for people to own their stories and to have a voice for the trauma that they've been through?
Well, as you said, it's healing. That is kind of the number one step to healing is to just own what happened. Okay, this happened to me. It completely sucked, but what am I going to do with it? What am I going to learn from it? How am I going to grow from it? And how am I going to move forward from it? And sharing your story, I've found, is very empowering because it takes you away from feeling like a victim and puts you in a place of survivor and thriver. And my past is no longer going to control me.
And I think when women who are really struggling with their past or trauma that they've been through, if they can see somebody else who is thriving and is able to overcome what they've been through, then it can inspire them to continue to move forward. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I have had so many women come to me after hearing just parts of my story, and they want to tell their story. And they may not want to go public with it, but they want to talk to somebody. And so we'll get on the phone and they'll tell me their story, and it starts that healing process for them. But for those who do share publicly, we do it a lot because we want other women to know that they're not alone and that whatever they're going through or whatever they've been through, there's other women out there who have gone through similar situations. This is how they are now. They've been able to survive. They've been able to thrive, and there's hope.
And hope is a big thing. Hope is so important. And if people have hope, then there is a real sort of space to find happiness and joy again in life, isn't there?
Yes. And, especially when you're in serious trauma situations, domestic abuse, sexual assault, those kinds of situations, it can feel hopeless. It can feel like, this is the end. and you just want to give up. Having that hope gives you something to hold on to, something to keep going for, something to work toward. So that hope is
Exactly. I love
incredibly
that.
powerful.
And how do you think that your Daring Women movement is different to other women empowerment groups?
I think that with Daring Woman, we're a bit edgier. I'm not personally about all the fluff and sugarcoating and, everything's going to be okay. I'm bold and brazen, and I'm going to come right out and tell you exactly how it is. My stories, when I talk, it's completely raw. And that, I think, makes it very different than a lot of others. I don't script anything with my guests and my women that I work with. Nothing is scripted. Everything is just pure raw energy, emotion, and stories. And I think that's kind of what makes us a little bit different. And then, that we're not afraid to tell it as it is.
I think having that rawness and that real genuine ability to just tell your story can really help you to really connect with people, and your story will then resonate so much more with others. Tell us your story, please, Tracey. What is your trauma story?
It's a long story, so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. It started when I was around 5 and my parents divorced. I lived with my mom for a bit, who just couldn't quite do the single mom thing. She worked at night. And so during the day while she was sleeping, I was left to fend for myself and kind of ran amok around, the apartment complex that we were living in. So I was sent to live with my grandmother, who was an emotionally abusive Italian grandmother. She didn't know any better. And I don't think she did and said things to intentionally harm, but it's just who she was. And so that started actually fear of abandonment, because I was abandoned by both parents. And that also started my food and sugar addiction. My earliest memories of sneaking food was at Grandma's house. She had this cookie tin that she kept all the cookies in, and I got really, really good at sneaking into that tin without making a sound. And that was just kind of the beginning of it all. And from there, it just kind of grew. I have vague memories of going out with one of my uncle's friends, who was also a neighbor, somebody that grew up around the family. So it was no big deal for him to go take me to the park or flying kites or something like that. But I have very, very vague visions of him kissing me when I was around probably 6 or 7. So I don't know exactly what else may have gone on, but I just have that one vague vision. So that kind of started the sexual assault thing. Fast forward, my teen years were fun. I lived with my dad in Montana and did not get along with my stepmom at all. So my teen years were crazy, became very promiscuous. And when I was 18, I moved out of the house and I moved in with my high school boyfriend, or the guy I was dating when I was 18, because I hadn't quite finished high school yet. The night of my senior prom, we went to prom, and I was so proud. I mean, here I am dating this older man. He was like 25.
Wow.
He was in his Navy uniform, he was my sailor. He was gorgeous. And we had a great time at the prom. When we went home, I know there was a little bit of drinking that went on, but we went to bed and doing our thing. And he decided he wanted to try something different, and I didn't want it. And he pinned me down on my stomach and sodomized me. All the while, I was screaming and crying and telling him to stop. So that was the first rape. And I moved out shortly after that.
That must have been so traumatic. I'm so sorry that happened.
I actually blocked it out for a very long time.
As in you couldn't really remember it?
I didn't remember it. It was several months before I actually remembered that it happened. And it was several years before I even remembered when it happened.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? That's like a coping mechanism.
It is. It really is. So a little bit later that year, I went to one of the local casinos and saw some guys there that I knew from work. I worked at a bowling alley. And, so I was hanging out with them and we were talking and they were buying me some drinks. And we decided to take it back to their apartment so that we could drink more and not have to worry about driving. And so we were just hanging out. All was good. And then I blacked out, or I passed out. I'm not entirely sure which, but I woke up and I was fully clothed, but my pants were full of semen. And I have no idea to this day what happened. I have no clue.
Do you think that your drink was drugged?
That's possible, but I don't think so. I mean, this was a long time ago. This was over 20 years ago. And they didn't really have date rape drugs back then, I don't think. Maybe they did. I don't
Right.
know. I was drinking hard liquor. I was drinking whiskey. And
Right. Oh, there you go. Okay.
yeah. And, I was 19. So I was a lightweight. I was never really a drinker before. So I have no idea what happened with one, with both. No clue. So I just chose to forget and kind of went on with my life. Fast forward several more years, I was pregnant with daughter number 2, and dad didn't want anything to do with what was going on. So I was dating somebody else. I call him my Greek Adonis. He was tall, he was sculpted, he was beautiful, he had long black hair. I mean, just gorgeous. But you put a drop of alcohol into him and his hair would like immediately get wild and he'd start foaming at the mouth. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He came to my apartment one night and wanted to get intimate, and I was not having it. I didn't want it. And he kept trying to get to me and whatnot, grabbed me and pulled me into his lap and was trying to get into my underwear. And I punched him in the head so that he would let me go. And he picked me up. Guy is over 6 foot tall, picked me up and he threw me onto the floor, 4 months pregnant. And so I called 911. That's the only time I ever called the police with the assaults. So I called 911. They came out. He took off. They couldn't find him. When I gave the cop my story and told him what happened, his only response was, well, you shouldn't have punched him.
My gosh, really?
Thanks, dude. Yeah, right. I guess I should have just let him have his way.
Do you think that you called the police because you were pregnant?
Oh, that was definitely part of it. And I was done. I wasn't having it anymore. And by that time, I realized that I don't deserve to be treated this way. Unfortunately, the pattern continued. I haven't been assaulted since, thankfully, but I have gone from one relationship to the next, oftentimes leaving one for another, and been in very abusive situations. And it's just kind of been a pattern up until probably about the last 10, 15 years. It's been a journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been a very, very hectic journey with lots of really, really traumatic events along the way. And some of them that you have either blocked out or don't remember, which must be a strange feeling to know that something has happened, but not being exactly sure what it is.
I don't remember much of my childhood. I don't remember a lot of things that happened in my teens and 20s. I can't remember. I remember little bits and pieces, but I can't remember a lot. And I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's my way of not dealing with it, just blocking it out and saying, okay, well, whatever, and moving on. Or it could just be that I have a really bad memory. I'm not sure.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it could be a coping mechanism, but I do know people that have had quite good, happy childhoods, but they don't really remember anything or much of it anyway. So it could be either of those things. But given that you've been through a bunch of trauma, the likelihood that it's a protection or a coping mechanism is quite high, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be a combination of both, really. It sucks. Sometimes I want to reach out to some old friends that I knew from high school or whatever and reminisce, and I don't remember anything. I can't really reminisce.
And if you do reach out to somebody from your past and they talk about things, can it trigger memories? Like, do you remember stuff when you're talking about things or not?
Sometimes, but not really. I have tried, and it's repressed or it's gone.
Right. Have you ever had any therapy?
No, I never had therapy. I never told anybody about any of it until I really started deciding that it was time to start speaking about my stories. Self-healing, which is not the road that I would recommend for people. I would definitely recommend you get professional assistance if you can. But I've learned a lot, at least. Now I'm able to help others as they go through their healing journeys.
Apart from self-healing, how has sharing your story impacted you personally and the other people around you?
It really has helped people to understand more about why I am the way I am today and why I've done a lot of what I've done in my past, especially my older girls and my oldest daughter especially, who we grew up together. I was 19 when I had her. She and I grew up together, and she's seen it all. And so, knowing now what happened to me before her really has helped her to understand why we went through what we went through as she grew up with my late husband. I don't understand why people call them late husbands. My husband just passed away, and so I'm still trying
I'm so
to deal with
sorry
all
to
of
hear that.
But with my husband, because he would sit next to me as I would do my podcast or I would speak or whatever, he'd be sitting right by my side. And so hearing my stories and hearing more and more of me talking really actually helped us strengthen our bond, because he was able to understand a lot of my triggers and, was very conscientious of that. So speaking has really helped to empower me and help me to really grow as a person.
Yeah, I can imagine that all of that would be really, really powerful and empowering and positive. And it's a great lesson for people out there who are holding on to things and feel afraid to share them. It's so interesting that you said that your husband was really supportive and it actually strengthened your bond. Many people feel that they can't share those sort of shameful or embarrassing things about their past because they're afraid that people will view them differently. So I think that's great that it strengthened your relationship.
Yeah, it really did. And I was lucky. He was amazing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that he's just passed away recently. Was that expected?
Very unexpected. Heart attack.
Oh, gosh. How old was he, may I ask?
46.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. And that was only a few weeks ago, wasn't it?
Right. The last week in May.
Oh, my gosh. So you're really just getting on with and trying to cope with your grief and moving forward and still podcasting and sharing your story, even though you've gone through this another unexpected tragedy.
Yes. Leaning on what I've learned and what I teach, definitely the first 2 weeks and just kind of the first week especially, I didn't even work. I told everybody, I'm like, I'm not even looking at my computer. And the second week, I just took it easy and did what I could. And when I didn't feel like working, in fact, I'm still doing that. When I don't feel like working because I'm stuck in grief or I'm in depression or whatever it is, I stop and I practice self-care. And that's the biggest thing with healing from any kind of trauma, is that you have to allow yourself that time to process, to find your new normal, to heal, to grieve. And so I'm just thankfully been able to allow myself as much time as I needed. Can't say it gets easier, but I just learn how to go about my day.
I can't really imagine it because I haven't experienced it, but I guess it isn't easy and you have to take each day as it comes. And I guess you have good days and bad days.
For me, I just take each moment. When somebody asks me how I'm doing, my answer is depending on when they ask me, but I had somebody reach out to me last night and I said, right now at this moment, I'm good, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. And sure enough, maybe an hour later, I was in tears. So I can only take it each moment at a time. And when you're fresh out of a trauma like that, that's all you can do. It doesn't matter what kind of a trauma it is, but you have to take it just one moment at a time.
I think that's really good advice for the early days of anybody who's going through grief, is the self-care and taking it one moment at a time. Is there anything else that you would advise for somebody going through this kind of situation, unexpected grief?
Try and have patience with people, because they want to help and they want to be supportive and they want to reach out, but they probably don't necessarily, unless they've actually been through something like what you're going through, they don't quite know the right things to say or to do. And sometimes it gets grating and irritating. Have a little bit of patience and just breathe and remind yourself they're just trying to be supportive. They may not know the right words to say or anything like that. And don't be afraid to reach out. If you need help or you need to talk to somebody, you just need a shoulder to cry on or whatever it is, reach out. There's times I would just hit up some random person on Facebook that I knew and just private message them and just unload. And most people are more than happy to give you an ear. It doesn't have to be a loss like I suffered. It could be, anything. Loss of a pet. It could be some kind of a trauma, an illness, whatever. A lot of the healing mechanisms are the same. And the biggest thing is don't keep it bottled up, because it creates a toxic environment. It just becomes poison.
How much of your Daring Woman movement and the work that you've done there has helped you to cope with this situation that you're in now?
Oh my goodness, so much of it. Because I've gone that route, not only with the media company, but also with coaching and launching an empowerment and trauma coaching company. I'm also working on launching a nonprofit to help survivors of trauma. All of that, all of the studying that I've been doing, everything like that has really helped me to process a lot, not just with losing Mark, but with a lot of things in my past. So, for example, I have an eating disorder. I am an overeater. I am, probably 100 pounds overweight right now. And I am the kind of person that if I eat one cookie in the package, I don't stop. No, I can't stop. I literally cannot stop until either I feel like I'm going to throw up or the cookies are gone. Actually, this just a couple of days ago, I finished reading a book and was working on some of the things that I learned from that book and trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I use these in my coaching with people? Because these are some really good ideas. And as I'm working through these, it dawned on me because I'm like, okay, I don't want to eat the ice cream. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't make my body happy. I feel like crap afterwards, physically, mentally, emotionally. But why am I still eating this ice cream? And so I sat there and I was analyzing it. And I actually, for the first time in my life, found the answer. And the answer is, where I felt like I was abandoned as a child at 5 years old. That's when my food issues started. Food will never abandon me. And that, being able to figure that out for me was huge because I'm an emotional eater too. And so you can imagine what I've been doing for the past 6 weeks. I have been eating like you wouldn't believe. And so uncovering that just because I'm working out some tools that I can use for somebody else, it was amazing. I can take that information and apply it to my own life and change my habits. But I also now am even more empowered to help other women do the same.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? If you've had the experience, if you've been through something or you have had some sort of issue related to the person that you're trying to help and support, then you're really able to help them more and empathize with them and have a greater understanding of what they're going through and how they're thinking and feeling about the issue that they're dealing with.
Absolutely. With Mark dying, I've been around grief. I've been around death. I lost my both parents. I lost one of my best friends. I've lost countless animals, aunts, uncles, grandparents. I've lost a lot in my life. And not one of those deaths was as painful as losing my husband. Nothing could have prepared me for that. And so, it's true what they say. Unless you've actually gone through it, you cannot possibly understand. A woman that I follow on Twitter and Instagram had a daughter with severe facial deformities. And I did an article on her for Daring Woman. And I've been following this story. Well, the child just passed away. And I wanted to reach out and offer my support and my comfort. And I have no idea what this woman's going through. Thank God I've never lost one of my children, not counting miscarriages. I can't even begin to fathom what she's feeling. And that's kind of how it is. If you haven't lost a parent, you haven't lost a spouse, you just don't know how that impacts people. You can guess, you can imagine, but honestly, you'll never be able to truly imagine and understand until you've been there. And so for me, with all the stuff that I have gone through over the past 47 years, sadly, I can empathize with a lot of people.
Yes, I can imagine you would. If you look at all the different things.
Yeah, I touched on quite a few different types of trauma in my life. And who knows, maybe that was preparing me for, this day to where I have the knowledge and the power and the experience now to be able to help women cope and heal and create a thriving life.
You call yourself a thriver, not a survivor. Can you explain to me why you do that and how important is the language that we choose to use about ourselves, do you think?
Oh, it's incredibly important. Words are so powerful. They have so much power. There's 3 stages, really. There's the victim when the trauma is happening, whatever it is. There's a survivor right after it's happened. You've survived it. And then you have to start the healing process. And then there's the thriver. And the thriver is you've done it, you've lived it, you've survived it, and now you've moved on. You've let it go. A lot of people get stuck in victim. My mom was bullied as a child by her brothers and her mother. And when, the day she died, she's 71, I think it's 72 when she died, she was still in that victim mentality. She was still incredibly angry. She harbored resentment against them. She never moved into survivor, really. And so it's really important that you move out of those phases and hit that final thriving phase, because that's when life really starts happening again.
That's so true. And how do you think that women or anybody can overcome really impactful events in their life, like domestic violence or rape or sexual abuse or death? How can they move from the victim to the survivor and the thriver? What are some of the things they can do?
The first thing is, depending on what the trauma is. So let's talk about domestic abuse or sexual assault, because they're some of the really most common ones that I work with. The first thing to realize is it's not your fault. And it's a very hard one, because it's, well, maybe if I was more perfect, I did better. I did this, I did that. I was wearing the wrong clothes. I was, whatever. It's not your fault. Okay. And you have to really understand and accept that. The second thing is you have to accept the fact that it happened. Yes, denial is a stage of healing. We all go through it. I, of course, went through it myself, but you have to accept that, okay, this has happened. I can't change it. I can't undo it. It's happened. And now how do I process this? How do I move on from this? And, a lot of it, depending on how deep the trauma is, you may need professional therapy to really help you with processing. Somebody who can really kind of help you work through the pain and the triggers and the flashbacks and whatnot. And, you have to learn also that pain never goes away. I don't care what the trauma is. The pain that you feel never goes away. They say time heals all wounds and time will ease the pain and blah, blah, blah. And it may ease it, but it will never go away. What happens is you learn how to grow and live with it. So it may not be prominent. You may not feel it, but it will always be a part of you. And you just have to learn how to live with it and, how to just become a better person or a different person with that pain, because it will never go away.
And then that's kind of a bit about acceptance, isn't it? If you can accept that it's kind of always there and will simmer in the background and that it's a part of the fabric of who you are, but it doesn't have to define you. That's the key, isn't it?
Exactly. Your past does not define who you are. What has happened in your past does not define who you are. Yes, I am a domestic abuse survivor. Yes, I am a sexual assault survivor. I am a widow. Those are things that have happened to me and have helped to kind of shape me to who I am today, but they don't define me. When somebody says, tell me, who are you? That's not what I come out with. Oh, well, I'm one of these survivors. That's not me. That's just something that has happened and is just a part of me.
How would you define yourself?
I am a very heart-centered person, very passionate. I'm very loving, very caring, and I'm strong.
Yeah, you sound like you're amazingly strong. I think you're an incredible role model for others. Yeah. And I can see how Daring Woman could just help so many people. It's such a great concept and a great service to the community, and especially to women. Women need to support women. We need to embrace that sisterhood. And I think that's part of why I really wanted to speak to you, hear your story, but also to give a platform for what you're doing, because I think it's so important to help support others, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Instead of competing with each other, we need to uplift and support one another, especially in this time, because we are in a time of change globally. I call it the age of the feminine, because women are now really coming out and saying, we're done. We are done with how we're being treated, how we've been treated, and we have to band together. One of my favorite sayings is, we're strong alone, but together we're unstoppable. And that is
I love
exactly
that.
true. One voice can be powerful, but a chorus of voices is insurmountable.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I think, through our podcasts and our work that we're doing, we can play a small role in making that sort of change in society, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Do you have an anecdotal story of how you've positively impacted somebody else through your Daring Woman movement?
Oh my gosh. I've had so many people come out and tell me that because I shared my story, they learned that it's okay to share theirs, and that what has happened to them, isn't who they are. I've had women who, after hearing my story, have come out publicly and go after their attacker, their abuser, their assault, their rapist, whatever. For me, that's exactly why I do it, because I want to give women that power to take back their life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I love that. That's great. So often women judge each other and put each other down and not really as supportive, like we were saying, as they could be. How do you think that we can change that and get people to embrace their differences and really understand each other and stop judging and really be more supportive and compassionate?
Judging and cattiness are signs of low self-esteem, really. You see somebody and you start judging them based on how they look or how they act or what kind of car they drive, whatever. There is something about them that you're seeing that maybe scares you or, resonates with you in a negative way. And that's because there's something unresolved within yourself. So the only way that we're going to be able to make changes is to start changing ourselves. Change begins within. And you can't come from a place of pain and anger and be all happy-go-lucky supportive. It doesn't work.
It's also about treating yourself with love and respect.
Exactly.
As you say, if you start with that, then you're going to be able to treat other people with love and respect because you're doing that for yourself first.
Exactly. And that is so, so difficult. That is one of those things that so many people just don't get. Me especially. I've tried for years. How do I love myself? Just standing in front of the mirror saying, I love you. That doesn't work. That just makes me feel like a dork. So it wasn't until I read this amazing book called Eat, Pray, #FML, which, for those of you listening, stands for F My Life, by Gabrielle Stone.
Oh, right.
I was reading this book of hers, and at the very end, she has the epiphany of what self-love really is. All it is just giving yourself what makes you happy, doing what makes you feel happy and whole, as opposed to the negative stuff. And so, loving yourself really just means doing for yourself what makes you happy.
Yeah, I think that's really so true. And really catching yourself with the negative self-talk and playing the opposite game. Like when you say, I'm not worthy, say, I am worthy. Like really just try to think about how powerful positive thinking can be.
It is. It is very powerful. But it's also difficult when you say you get that imposter syndrome. And something else that I've learned from her book is what she calls a thought onion. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And basically what it is, our thoughts have layers like an onion, and we have to peel those layers back. So you have that superficial thought, I'm not worthy. Okay, well, that's the superficial thought, but what's the more accurate statement? And you have to dive down into that. Okay, well, now what's the real deep subconscious statement? And you just have to kind of start peeling back those layers until you figure out where that deep rooted belief comes from. While we can say, I am worthy, all we want, a lot of times it doesn't help. It doesn't really change anything until we really dig down and figure out why we feel we're not worthy. And that's how I found out about the food abandonment. The food will never abandon me. I was working on that exercise, and it's powerful. It's very powerful because now I can say, okay, I am worthy of eating healthy foods. I am worthy of being able to lose the weight. I don't need this weight on anymore because Now I know where that deep-seated limiting belief came from, and I can now change
So
that.
now that you've discovered that limiting belief and where it comes from and you're able to identify it, what actual physical actions can you take to make these changes, do you think? Is that the hard part, to actually make the changes?
Honestly, no. The hard part was discovering and uncovering that deep-rooted belief, because that's the pain area, right? And so once I was able to discover that, now when I go to the kitchen and I want to eat something, I can say, okay, I know that the ice cream is not even going to taste good after like the first bite. It's not going to make me feel good. Let's have an apple. The physical changes, I think, are the easy part once you've discovered what's been blocking you.
I think you're right. And then it's really just about having a commitment to making that change. Changing your habits, it's a lifestyle, isn't it? It's not temporary. It's got to be long term.
Yeah. You know, they say it takes 21 days to build a habit or form a habit, but it only takes just a matter of minutes to break it. It really is something that you have to work on and reinforce every day. If it's something that makes you happy, it makes it easier. So now my new thing is, okay, and I keep going back to the ice cream example because it's just easier, I think, for people to relate to, but it's okay. I want some ice cream, but will this ice cream, does it make me smile? Does it make my heart sing? Does it make my body happy? You know, does it make my soul sing? And if I can't answer yes to those, then it's not really something that I want now, because I want something that's going to hit yes on all four of those questions.
Yes, I was going to say that's a really good test, isn't it, for whether you're doing the right thing by yourself.
It's, you know, does this make me happy on all of these levels?
Awesome. Hey, Tracey, do you have any thoughts on the power of forgiveness?
Oh, my goodness. So forgiveness is absolutely crucial to healing. However, when I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about forgiving other people necessarily. Have I forgiven TJ for raping me? Have I forgiven Orlando for breaking the neck of my 10-week-old kitten in front of me? Never. But what I have been able to do is forgive myself. And that's where that power of forgiveness comes into play. It's not necessarily forgiving the people who have harmed you, but it's forgiving yourself for how you felt because of that, what you did after that. I had to forgive myself for putting me in those situations to where I'm, you know, repeating these patterns of abuse. And with these losers, I had to forgive myself for that. And until I could do that, I couldn't move on.
Yeah,
the power
I really
of forgiveness absolutely has to begin with yourself. You know, absolutely you can forgive other people. There's plenty of transgressions that I've been able to forgive. That's entirely personal and up to each individual. But the number one person that you have to forgive about anything and everybody else is yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And what about letting go of shame? Do you have any thoughts on that and any advice?
Shame comes about because we feel guilty about whatever happened. We're taking the ownership. I felt ashamed because I was abused. I felt ashamed because I was raped. I felt ashamed because I'm overweight and I can't stop eating. That's because I feel guilty. It's not until you start that forgiveness that you can let go of the shame. I forgive myself for hating myself after I was assaulted. I forgive myself for feeling guilty about putting myself in a situation where I had to watch somebody murder my cat. Things like that. I had to forgive myself for the feelings that I felt around those transgressions. And once I was able to start doing that and creating that forgiveness within, that's when I can let go of the shame. And letting go of the shame makes it so much easier to start telling your story.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Once you let go of the shame, then you really can start to own your story. And in other ways, sometimes when you start to own your story, you're able to let go of the shame. It can come either way around, really, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tracey, do you have any tips on how my listeners can feel more empowered and confident in their day-to-day life?
Oh, my goodness. Start with the small things. What is something small that you can do to make yourself feel stronger? For me, it's superficial things. When I actually take the time to, because, I work from home, so I work in sweat clothes and my hair in a ponytail and whatnot. So when I take the time to actually dress nicer, put on makeup, curl my hair, I feel like a whole different person. I feel so much more confident and in control and whatnot. So you need to find, those little things that make you feel better. And then you start finding the bigger things. And, it just kind of creates a snowball because you get that confident feeling and it's like a high. I want to continue feeling like this. I love how I feel. I'm so productive. I'm so happy. I feel vibrant. People around me are feeling better. You want to continue that feeling. And so you just keep finding ways to nurture that confidence and that empowerment.
Yeah, that's great advice. Tracey, if my listeners wanted to contact you or join the Daring Woman group or just seek support or advice, how can they do that?
Definitely go to daringwomaninc.com, and that's Daring Woman singular, inc.com. That's the website. You can find me and everything else there. The Daring Woman community or the group is on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/Daring Woman. It is a very safe sanctuary, a safe haven where you can come and just talk about whatever you need to talk about and know that what happens in that group stays in that group and that you will be received with just love and support. And it's a no judgment, no hate zone.
It's a way for people to find their tribe.
Absolutely.
Tracey, thank you so much for coming on Hong Kong Confidential and sharing your story and your wisdom with us. It's been really, really wonderful to talk to you. And I really, really appreciate you, all that you're doing for women around the world. And I hope that more people will get in touch with you and find support in the work that you're doing through this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed having this conversation with you. And again, I'm honored that you made the exception to do this remotely for me. As much as I would love to come to Hong Kong.
Yeah, Tracey is in Atlanta and I'm in Hong Kong, and it's my first remote podcast. And it was great. It was a really, really great experience. And I just felt that your story was one that needs to be shared. And it's a really candid conversation about stuff that many people aren't comfortable talking about. And I think we need, the more we can talk about these things, the more we help others.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So for my listeners out there, if this is a story that resonates with you, or you have a friend that you feel would really benefit from hearing Tracey's story or learning more about her Daring Woman program, then please will you share it? And Tracey, I just want to say thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. The pleasure has been all mine. Thank you so much.
Lovely to meet you. Have a great day in Atlanta, Tracey. See you later.
All right.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.